Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Newsmakers TV, on the air since 2014 with analysis and commentary from Santa Barbara's leading journalists about the biggest stories in local news. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, June 30th, 2023, and this is a special press clips episode of the program. Today, we look at Santa Barbara's modern media landscape and examine how it's been shaped not only by economic megatrends that transform the news industry around the world, but also by a very local controversy that captured the attention of the entire town and the nation a generation ago. Who better to discuss all this than four top-ranked local journalists who were smack dab in the middle of those remarkable and contentious events, and who join me today. Starshine Roshell, prize-winning local columnist, who is now a producer for LinkedIn. Josh Molina, journalism educator, podcaster, and politics and public policy writer for Newshawk. Melinda Burns, community hero and veteran enterprise and investigative local reporter. And Nick Welsh, the Independent's editor and star columnist, and Santa Barbara's very own Mark Twain. Ladies and gents, our producer, Hap Freund, and I were speaking the other day and amazed to realize that this spring marked the 15th anniversary of the sold-out premiere at the Arlington of the documentary Citizen Macaw, a masterpiece of storytelling. The film, of course, chronicles events from 2 years earlier, which began July 6, 2006, and subsequently were dubbed the Smackdown in Santa Barbara and the Meltdown at the Morning Paper. For those too young to remember who got drunk and slept through the whole thing, it's available on YouTube by Googling Citizen Macaw, and we'll also put links to the film and other coverage in our free subscription newsletter, which you really should be subscribing to, and which you can sign up for at newsmakerswithjr.com. By way of quick summary, though, senior editors of the news press, including this one, resigned en masse in 2006. Because of our strong objection to what we felt was undue influence on news coverage by the owner of the paper. That led the staff to organize a successful union organizing drive, and these occurrences together triggered months and years of lawsuits, firings, resignations, boycotts, protests, rallies, recriminations, public convocations, and untoward accusations, which collectively forever changed the news and media milieu of Santa Barbara. The documentary depicts much of this, but concludes near the end of 2007. So today I want to focus on what has happened since and update some of the characters and issues it recounts and raises. Starshine, let me start with you. Back in 2006, you were writing a very popular column for the daily newspaper. Where were you when this whole thing went down? And talk a little bit about what the aftermath was like for you and what you've been up to since.
Yeah, I have a little PTSD from it, as I'm sure a lot of other people on this call do. I remember it being very dramatic. I remember feeling like I love a good fight. So I was sort of riled up and really excited to fight for something that I felt so strongly about. I feel like it's so rare in life that 100% that you are right when you dive into an argument. And that was one that I was like, no, we are 100% correct here. And I'm going to go to the mat on this one. And so it was exciting for that reason. And there was sort of a sense of like, heroism with all of the people in the newsroom, banding together. And we're not joiners. Like, reporters by nature are not, people who band together for anything. We're sort of like this lone wolf kind of crowd, and everybody just linked arms and was like, no, you're not taking this institution down that we love. And so that was kind of cool, but the rest of it was hard and really sad. It was really hard and sad to watch people that I love and respect leave. And I understood why they were leaving, because they could no longer do the work there that they came to do and that, fired them up every day. And then eventually I left myself. Al Bonowitz, who was the travel editor, I think at the time, and he rented a tux and I dressed up in a ball gown, and we handed in our resignations that morning and left. Everyone had to do it in their own special way. But the column, I wrote a column about what was going on in there. And then the next week, my column was canceled. I remember that much.
But you more, as much as anyone, I think, have really adapted to the online transformation of the media, certainly in your current post and previously as well. I mean, things have changed.
Yeah, for sure. They've changed really quickly, and not just here. Obviously, you know, this was sort of a harbinger of what was to come at newspapers all over the country, and even what was to come politically. But yeah, I mean, to see what's been going on, and the news press, frankly, sort of never caught up with that whole digital situation. It's
Although
been
they're
very
all
strange.
online now.
Yeah,
Hey,
but it was
Josh.
so long where there was you know, you had to pay to read it. It was very strange.
Yeah. Josh, as Starshine points out, this really upset a lot of people's career plans. I mean, you know, when I came to Santa Barbara in 2002, my secret plan was this was going to be my last job and I was going to retire from it. And well, that didn't exactly work out. And you, you know, given again, you know, some of these larger trends that have taken over the news industry have really had to hustle to keep up. What's been your experience since the deal went down?
Well, when it all went down, I was very much enjoying being one of your students in the newsroom, somebody who was learning from you immensely. And we were doing a lot of great work, not just you and I, but you and the entire staff. And so at the time, it sort of felt like, wow, this is exactly what journalism is supposed to be. And I don't even have to work at the New York Times or the LA Times to get this high quality journalism. It felt really good. And then all of a sudden, overnight, it all ended for all the reasons people could watch in the movie. I think Nick Welsh, when I left, he wrote that I was a rising star. I was the heavy lifter in the newsroom. And that was true. Like, I was covering City Hall and I was really excited about how I was covering things. And I was young and aggressive and wanting to be on page one every day or have multiple stories. And so it was, you know, now in my old age, I think about those days and I was just overwhelmed. Like, I didn't know what hit me. Like, I couldn't, I don't even understand what I did at that time because it was happening so fast. But like Starshine said, I knew I could not stay. I could not stay in that newsroom, both for ethical reasons, right? Like I could not stay after what had happened to you and others, but also just, you know, I was a young rising star. I wanted to do great journalism. So I had to go somewhere else to do that. And so I went to the San Jose Mercury News and I worked there for a little more than 2 years, which was the best job I've ever had. You know, if I could, and I could have had all my family there, I'd still be there. It was amazing to be covering City Hall in that big market. But I had a son, he was 1 at the time, and my wife just did not want to move. So I had to decide whether to, you know, get a divorce and do a long distance thing and follow the career, or come back and try to make it work the way so many of us try to make it work in Santa Barbara, which is cobbling together lots of jobs and figuring it out. And so that's what I did. City College asked me to teach a class in 2009. And my old advisor, Patricia Stark, called me up. I was terrified. I had no idea what I was going to do. I was going to say no on the call. She talked me into it. I said yes. And I've been teaching there as a part-timer since, and I love it. So I cobbled together City College. I've worked at a lot of places in the meantime. I've settled in at Newshawk, and I also teach at Cal State Northridge.
But Josh, I do want to just interrupt here. You're leaving out the best part of what you're doing, which is your wrestling writing, which you cover pro wrestling.
The UFC.
This is what you have to do. If you can't make it on a daily gig, you have to become. Now, do you write under your own name or do you have a pseudonym?
Well, unfortunately, I'm now at a place where I don't need to do those kind of side jobs. But yes, there's a period.
So Starshine
knows this, where you'll write anything to make it work and to live here in Santa Barbara without compromising your integrity.
So
But yeah,
your
I
free
did plenty
tickets,
of MMA writing.
Been
You're-
there, did that. Yep.
your free cage match tickets are now canceled. Hey, Melinda, let me bring you in here. You, of course, were a key organizer of the union, the Teamsters at the time, and really focused on that. The film does chronicle you getting fired with a number of your colleagues in the wake of that. But you are now, along with me, pioneering a new business model of journalism, which is working really hard for free. Talk a little bit about what the intervening years and what that was like for you.
Well, being a senior writer at the News Press was a great job. I was a projects reporter, so I did like one story a week, you know, sort of in depth. Or maybe I had a couple of weeks on certain things, and I loved it.
I recall it was a couple of weeks, Melinda, but go ahead.
And so we called in the Teamsters because we knew they had the moxie and the bucks, and they had the fighting spirit to go up against a very wealthy bad boss. And it was exhilarating sometimes to be working with the Teamsters in a community that really responded, just absolutely in solidarity with all of us, canceling their subscriptions. I mean, it's so hard to find anybody who still subscribes to the News Press. And they responded. Thousands of people canceled their subscriptions. We ran the drive, and 8 of us were fired. I was the first, very proud of that. And we lost our case. Unfortunately, we drew a bad panel in the appeals court in DC. But for 2 years, I sort of suspended everything. I had job offers, especially from, you know, people who would call me up and say, would you please write my memoirs? And usually they were interesting people, but I just didn't want to take the time to do that. I was able to cobble it together with the help of the Teamsters. In fact, we got something called strike benefits, and then different locals of the union would donate money. And Dawn and I somehow, you know, scraped by in those 2 years where we were organizing this boycott. And again, nothing but respect and admiration for the community that stood behind us.
Yeah.
And
And now
Let me
you
jump
are.
in here for a second. I mean,
Yeah.
Santa Barbara is not a real union town, and it isn't certainly the Teamsters do not elicit the warm and fuzzies of the Santa Barbara community. But Wendy P. McCaw, the owner of the News Press, is probably the only person on the planet who can make Santa Barbara embrace the Teamsters. And conversely, she's also the only person on the planet who can make people feel sorry for the Teamsters. Because I think at the end of it, they will win, but at enormous cost to themselves and to everybody else. The cases have dragged out like a terminal disease. It's just, you know, everybody has been through the ringer on this. And really looking at you guys here and the names that you've mentioned, and Barney Branningham and Chammy Coey and all the other reporters who basically had to choose between a job that they loved and a job that paid better than okay, and where they were making a difference, and their morals or their ethics. You know, it was really quite impressive. People really had to make a tough choice. And
Hey, Nick, I think it's fair to say, and everyone would agree, that you stole a show in terms of the movie with some of your comments, and people can see them in them. But you kind of went through some hard times after that, which you also are still having to deal with.
Well, I mean, part of the urgency with my interview that I was feeling that had nothing to do with the subject at hand was I had some serious tongue cancer surgery laying ahead of me at that moment, and I had no idea what I would sound like when I came out, because they were going to slice a big chunk of my tongue out. And I had no idea what I was going to be able, if I'd be intelligible at all. So I wanted to have a vocal legacy for my kids to remember this is what I sounded like. And then I was also getting sued by Wendy McCaw at the time.
Well, there is that. And what was your take on the whole thing? I mean, just in terms of kind of how it changed the way people get and consume news in Santa Barbara. And you've been doing this longer than anybody, except maybe.
You know, I think it's sort of don't think of a white bear. I mean, the lack of a daily paper. I mean, dailies have been going the way of the platypus for a while now, and probably would have gone there. But with Wendy P. McCaw at the helm, they accelerated the process. It was a self-inflicted prefrontal lobotomy, on the newspaper and on the collective history of Santa Barbara as newspapers manifest. And a daily paper is a unique vehicle where the community talks to itself. And I think we've all worked in our own ways, sometimes heroically, sometimes grumbling and whining, and exhaustingly. But I don't think any of us have quite created the forum and the microphone and the megaphone that a daily paper used to have. And I think, again, I'm putting words in Melinda's mouth here, but when we went into the debris flow disaster, there was a press conference the Friday beforehand, but before the Tuesday of the debris flow, and nobody was there. Or we were there. Keith Ham wrote about it. It went up online. Guess what? It missed. And the press conference was, get out while you can. It's coming down. Take this seriously. I like to think, based on past experience, not just sentimentality, that Melinda Burns would have gotten every freaking historic debris flow story that's ever been written in the paper with photographs, and would have plastered that all over the front page between that Friday, that Saturday, that Sunday, and that Monday. And if you didn't get the memo, it would be your own damn fault.
Yeah.
And
hey,
go ahead.
Yeah, Star, we're 5 people here, but there were scores of people in that newsroom, more than 60 people. And, we saw a lot of colleagues who left town and other things. Rob Kuznia, of course, famously, who covered education for us, went on to win a Pulitzer Prize. So we're not feeling too bad for him. But others, you mentioned, somebody mentioned Cammie. Who are some other people that you can just kind of bring us up to date on?
Yeah, I mean, Tom Schultz was a reporter there. He and I both went to work for lynda.com in communications, and he stayed on to work at LinkedIn as well. He's with another tech company now. Rob, of course, went on to do his thing. Al Bonowitz went to work for Westways, AAA magazine. Andy Hebner, who was an editor in features, is working for UC study abroad program. Everybody sort of found a way. Maria Zate, our business reporter, went to work for Cottage. Everybody found a place where they, everybody needs a good communicator, but it's not the same. It's not the same thing. I always felt like we were sort of like a pirate ship, in our newsroom, because it was just like this sort of motley band of like people who don't like following rules and sort of like to stick it to authority. And
Josh, you got anybody you want to update us on?
Well, my old friend Colin Powers, who we all remember well as a savant, quite frankly, and he was on the copy desk, and he still working in journalism. He works at the Portland Oregonian, and he's still designing pages. And he's one of those people that not a lot of like the locals will know because of the byline, but us in the newsroom who interacted with him knew he was odd. You won't mind me saying that, but extremely intelligent, and did great work. I talked to Barney McManigal a little bit sometimes. I think somebody mentioned him. And I think he's off in England, researching, working on some big media thing for a PhD. I don't know exactly. Of course, we see people around town. Cami works. Where does Cami work? She works for the Santa Barbara County Office of Education, and she's doing public affairs. So, I think that we had kind of an all-star team without even knowing it. Like in retrospect, you look back and you're like, wow, all of those people were so good at what they did. And we all kind of did it a little bit differently. And it's such a shame. And I know there are people watching who are going to say, oh my goodness, these journalists, they love to talk about themselves. No, like we were really good. We were better than we should have been for a paper of this size in this market. Melinda Burns, I don't want to go on and on. Jerry's going to interrupt me, but fantastic investigative reporter. And she's doing it now for free. And back then, I mean, I wish we had an archive where we could go look at all these stories, because people would be blown away at the work that we did.
Here's the other thing.
Let me just mention a couple of names real.
Can I just mention Dawn Hobbs?
Dawn Hobbs,
a fabulous courts reporter. She was great.
Bill Brown would not be sheriff without Dawn Hobbs.
The Michael Jackson case, of course, she famously covered it. George Fulsham, who was our managing editor, went on and spent some years as the press person out at UCSB, and then went down to UCLA for a while, and now is just an incredible photographer. His stuff is on Facebook all the time. And Don Murphy, a good friend of a lot of ours, left town, moved to Monterey and worked for the paper there for a while, and then became a political consultant. Jane Hulse, who was our city editor, just published her second novel, I think, something like that. So she actually had some talent. And Melinda, have you kept track of Michael? What's he up to?
Michael works for Sage Communications still.
Michael Todd, yeah, he left.
Very smart guy, wonderful editor, city editor. I loved working with him. And I really miss having somebody next to me in what is my office now, just to say, hey, will you look at this lead? Does this make sense? Or do you understand the word acre feet? Can I use that in a story?
No.
60,000 toilets flushing simultaneously.
And the question is, here's the thing.
But I just want to say, can I just say again here, that when Dawn Hobbs first came to the paper, I was constantly asking her to turn down her police scanner because it was very loud and I needed to have a little bit of peace. And so I was constantly turning it down when she left the room. She would come back, turn it up, and we became co-conspirators and very closely working together for years there with the Teamsters. A better partner in crime could not have been.
Nick, what were you going to say?
To go back to what difference it makes, who has replaced all these people? Okay, we can all go like this and say, did we do a great job? And yeah, we did. And you absolutely did. But who has been hired since? Name a name. Mr. White?
Well, no, it's
like the withering and atrophying of the newsroom and the coverage. And you think about how hungry reporters are for work. You would think, oh my God, we have a newspaper in Santa Barbara. We can fill it with, all these, we can have the pick of the litter. There's nobody.
No, there's just not a lot of reporters working in town, period.
And they hired these nice interns from, what did it say, Reagan Ranch, foundation, whatever they're called, and you get these sort of right-wing conservative ideologues who are news interns.
Hey, Jerry, I want to say one thing to change the subject because I don't want to forget him. He's sort of my talented Mr. Ripley person who I shadowed everywhere he went, with Scott Hadley, who is right up there. Like, I will never be a quarter of the journalist he is.
He was so
incredibly good investigative journalist who sold out and went to 23.
Yeah, and making some real money at 23. Hey, Josh, flipping ahead again. I mean, so if we look at what the landscape looks like today, obviously Newshawk has emerged. And Nick, I want to get to you in a second about how the Independent changed, but Newshawk has emerged to try to fill the void of some of the reporting, obviously all online. No, I forget what McFadden's always trashing print about. I forget what his phrase is, but talk about that a little bit.
So Bill McFadden and Tom Bolton and Kim Clark, they all used to work at the News Press. They left before the meltdown, and their friends, they started Newshawk, and they have done we obviously people will debate this, but they've done a good job providing local news for Santa Barbara online, an online newspaper. It's going to make it, right? It's been around, it's established, it's going to be here forever. It has a large following that kind of balances out the Independent a little bit in terms of maybe some of the issues that it covers. And, I enjoy working there. It gives me a lot of freedom. We're a small staff, right? Money is the reason for everything, right? There is no money in journalism. People don't pay for content. People might donate, they might give some, they might have subscribers. But you need money to pay people to be reporters, and to get great reporters, you need to pay more. And so I always consider myself, the management maybe rivals, like the people who own the papers, but I sort of consider Nick, a colleague, a peer. We're working in this newsroom in Santa Barbara together, even though we work for different companies. And I think that's one of the things that came out of it, is that we're now banded together by just our love and need for quality journalism. And I know there's no need to be competitive with one another, because if Nick has a great story, that's only good for all of us. And that's what we want. So I think it's changed a little bit in that regard too.
Hey, Nick, there was a lot of talk at the time that, the Independent should go daily, should become a daily and jump into the breach and do that. Why didn't that happen, or was that ever seriously considered? Or
it was seriously considered. It was examined, and we determined it was genetically impossible to make that kind of transformation. And it's a market realities and what it was entailed, and we didn't have the DNA to make that jump, but what we did in a different way. What this whole thing did for us is it lit a butane lighter under our collective rear ends and says, you better get online and you better start, posting your news, and you can't just be a fossil. You need to play the fossil journalism, the old. People want to pick up a newspaper in Santa Barbara and read it, but more and more and more and more people read the newspapers through their phones, through their laptops. And the problem, of course, is that everybody knows is that the money is in the paper, and the eyeballs are on the laptops, but not the money. And so we are struggling, with our pretense and sometimes our reality of being the daily paper in Santa Barbara.
Yeah. Hey, Starshine, pick up on that point of Nick's in terms of the digital economy, the online economy, the eyeball economy, whatever you want to call it. You obviously bring a lot of journalism skills to your current position. Talk a little bit about how you found or view, the kind of online market with it that people who want to do journalism or have, that kind of experience can do.
Yeah. I mean, I found it sort of by accident. I did the same thing that Josh did. Patricia Stark, as you mentioned, is very convincing. And I also taught journalism at City College and a little bit at UCSB for like 5 years. And then I went to work at lynda.com because they were doing some cool stuff that I thought was noble and interesting and on the rise, which journalism wasn't. So that was exciting. But yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, online news has opened up a lot of things, which is that, now you've got places like ProPublica where, that are doing this amazing investigative work, but they're not a newspaper, or they're not backed by a normal news organization like you would think in the traditional sense. But also it's done some things that I don't love just as a more traditional journalist, in that a lot of people are posting and people think it's news. They can't tell the difference anymore between someone who's following and the ethical tenets of journalism versus somebody who just, you know, has an opinion and wants to rant, which as a columnist, I can say, I know the difference, you know, one, they have to be labeled clearly. And if they're not, it's not real journalism. And I think that
and we're not
line
we're not
blurring.
even talking about artificial intelligence yet, which is that's a whole nother headache. Hey, Melinda, I don't want to take the entire month to go through this, but which we easily could, but there were so many lawsuits and various litigation filed involving the Teamsters and the union. Can you just update those real quickly? What happened with those?
So 3 cases. First, the 8 of us who were fired right after we voted for a union. We lost that in DC appeals court in 2012. Second case, bad faith bargaining, failure to pay merit increases as a retaliation against the union, firing a reporter and a columnist. It was a bunch of unfair labor practices all rolled up in one. Won that case in 2017, and nothing happened. She never bargained. She went back briefly to the bargaining table. And I sat at that bargaining table for a couple of years. It was so insulting and infuriating because they just said no. They had their anti-union, their union busting attorneys there, one after another, many law firms. And they just said no. So we won that case. And then third case, monetary damages out of the second case of $2 million for paying back the Teamsters for all those years of expenses of bargaining that didn't go anywhere, paying the merit pay that was owed to my former colleagues, paying them for hiring temps to replace them, and paying the 2 reporters, the columnist and the reporter who were unjustly let go. One was fired, one was laid off. And so still no money. She hasn't paid a dime. And so in the bad faith bargaining case, the National Labor Relations Board has filed a petition for contempt of court. And the DC court has not yet ruled on whether or not Wendy McCaw and her company, Ampersand, are in contempt. And we don't know if they did find her to be in contempt, what the penalties would be. And then in the monetary case, they're looking for ways to attach her assets. That case is final. She has no more appeals. And still not a dime has been paid.
But Jerry Roberts knows how to attach assets. He had to do something in order to get paid.
Yeah, my own case only went on for 6 years. I got sued for $25 million. But you know what you say, Melinda, it's just, I always knew this kind of intuitively or I guess intellectually, the way that the justice system in the US is really tilted toward the wealthy, toward people who have money. So finally, the California State Court of Appeal tossed the final appeal that she had, and I was awarded some money, which I spent over $1 million on legal fees defending myself, and it almost covered it. But I did, I did have to hire another attorney to try to get my money. And it was interesting. And during that time, I also got 2 cases of cancer. And the second one was interesting because I was driving up. My wife was driving me up to San Francisco to be admitted to the hospital. And I was like, and I got a text from Herb Fox, who was my appeals attorney. And he said, her check just cleared with multiple exclamation points. So anyway, I do also should mention the Lawyers Alliance, which was a group of lawyers who banded together to provide a lot of free legal advice for people who got caught up in this, and also helped me raise a bunch of money. And per an agreement I had, I also donated $75,000 of that settlement to various journalism organizations.
Jerry, I feel that, it would be remiss if it wasn't mentioned how you were slimed in the front page of the news press on a Sunday morning above the fold without attribution article.
It was actually below the fold, but that's
Oh gosh, I better get my facts right. Basically saying you had a bunch of pornography on your workplace computer, and they cited legal actions in which this allegation was made. I had already looked into that and talked to all the law enforcement agencies in towns, and they said, we investigated that. We found no evidence that it was true, but because it was in a legal filing, the media could report it without fear of any sort of reprisal. You're the only person I know who has been so smeared who wound up getting an ethics award for it. And again, that's sort of only Wendy McCaw is capable of making something like that so upside down happen.
yeah, no.
That had to be truly.
Yeah, that was a bad
Yeah.
time, and that's in the movie as well.
That was a low, and no byline, if you recall, which
Yeah.
journalists know is the most cowardly thing you can do.
Yeah, there was a lot that went into that, and it'll be all detailed in my forthcoming memoir, Settling My Scores, when I get around to it. Josh, I know Josh has got to run. You got any final thoughts for us?
Well, I don't know. I would just say that it's very disappointing to see what happened to all of us, even though we all landed on our feet and we're all doing this tremendous work in other careers, some of us. But I can't even imagine where we would have been had we were able to stay together for another 10 years, because we were doing such great work. And I don't think that people really understand what we had in this town. I think that people have short memories, and it's unfortunate that people don't know their local media history. They just sort of think things the way they are now have always been that way. And the truth of the matter is, government, city, county, every form of government has benefited, unfortunately, from a lack of watchdog journalism in its daily coverage, because we all individually are very strong, but you need resources, you need time, you need people and support higher up in the chain to be able to devote to investigating corruption. And I think that's the sad thing that we're experiencing is government's power has grown tremendously because of a lack of a watchdog oversight. And that's not to say the Indy doesn't do a great job, and Newshawk and others, but we can't do it in the same way that we used to. And I think that's sad. I will want to note the only elected official that I can recall who supported us during that time, who showed up at the Arlington, was Helene Schneider.
Marty Bloom was at the rallies.
Marty
Bloom.
She showed up at
Lois
Kathy
Capps was
Maria.
there. Lois was
Lois
there.
Capps. Okay.
Kathy Maria.
Kathy,
People will talk about how important local journalism is, but if we are looking at real history, there were only a few of those people who actually stood by us. So, I think that's sort of the saddest part is we're all doing the best job we can, but the quality of journalism is not what it once was. And I don't know how much people even care anymore. It's
well, that's an interesting point. And I'm getting a couple of notes in the chat here. Yes, we should mention Shelley Leachman, who was an editor out at UCSB, and Nora Wallace, of course, our old friend, who covered all of North County by herself and, washed windows with her third hand, is a executive at Lompoc Hospital. But, the other thing is, think about this, 2006, that was the year before the iPhone came out. Okay, there was no such thing as Facebook and Twitter, and let alone TikTok or Instagram or any of those things. The whole social media thing hadn't happened. Obviously, the Trump era hadn't begun either. But the way that people get and process information has just been so completely changed that
Jerry, I think we still would have made a go of it, don't you?
no, I do. With adaptation and certainly Starshine's high tech knowledge there would have been very helpful, I think, in terms of that. But Raul Hill, let's not forget Raul, who was at Yardi. He made the place run.
And Lois Capps was very much very vocal in our support at rallies. I heard her address a whole audience of Teamsters in Washington about our situation. So
yeah. All right. Well, time for final thoughts. The 17th anniversary of July 6, 2006 is kind of a crooked number, Starshine. So I'm not sure that we want to have a big blowout celebration this year. But what's your bottom line? What's your takeaway from all this that you've been through and that we've all been through?
It's sad. I was thinking about this today. My parents were divorcing when all of this was going on. And I remember specifically thinking in my head, like, this was a family to me. And I remember thinking like, no, I'm not going to let another family of mine bust up. Like, I'm going to do everything I can to hold it together. It didn't work, but it was a hell of a fight. And I still think back like that. I have a lump in my throat just talking about it today. I was going through photo albums and I found like this, remember that? Boycott the news press. Yeah. It's such an honor for me to have taken part in that fight. And it's still so sad to me that it had to happen.
Yeah.
thank you for wearing your button, Macaw, obey the law. She didn't. She's a lawbreaker.
All right. Josh, final thought?
Well, I'm going to be a little bit positive here. And Starshine and I, we have sons who graduated high school this year. When I left the News Press, my son was 1, and it was like just horrible because you think when you're at that stage of life, you're like, you're married, you have new kids, you're like madly in love. It's like life is perfect, right? And I haven't had a day of journalism where it was just like stable and solid since those days. We didn't know how good we had it, but
This is
we
your
survived.
positive. This is the positive.
No, my point is though, we survived. We made it work. We're resilient. We're tough. We're journalists. We figured out a way. And Starshine reinvented herself multiple times, and I had to reinvent myself. And here we are, and we're at another stage of our life, and our kids are growing up, and we're still here doing what we're doing. And I just think that the great part of it, Jerry, and then I got to go, but I have to thank you, because without you, if I had never met you, if you never come into that newsroom, I don't know that I would love journalism as much that I do, because you made it fun. You helped me understand why it matters, why it's important. And you made me better, but not by coddling, having high standards. And because of that, I just feel so lucky to have been able to have you in the newsroom. And that's why I stick to you like glue 15 years later, because whether we're in a newsroom or not, I still learn from you. And this show, Jerry, that you do, you're still incredibly relevant. Everywhere I go, I see you on Jerry's show, you're really good. You and Jerry, blah, blah, blah. And you and Nick, you are still relevant. So, Nick was the star of Citizen Macaw, no doubt, because he's so funny, so smart, so articulate. But Jerry, you're kind of the star of all of this, because you're still here, you're still relevant, and you're still the guy in Santa Barbara. So
And
I guess
fearless.
Okay, I didn't pay him to say any of that. I've got to say, obviously.
All right, I gotta go. Pick up
All
my
right,
kid.
take
See
care.
you later.
Melinda, final thoughts?
Yeah, I used to cover farm workers who lost their jobs, and for you're organizing a union, and then it would be years later, lawyers trying to find them to give them their back pay, and I just never considered that it would happen to me and all of us, and it's just been a terrible eye-opening ordeal to to watch what happens if a bad boss has enough money and enough determination and is willing to spend enough money to delay justice. And there's no question that we won in the court of public opinion. We fought the good fight. But even so, and even with the Teamsters and all of their clout and savvy and fighting spirit behind us, we have not won in the court of law. She hasn't paid a dime to anybody. And it's 17 years. And justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
And we got to do something about that.
Nick, final thoughts?
Oh, I'm glad I'm inspired by seeing the reincarnations here. Maybe that's a good thing. It's unfortunate that you have to reincarnate yourself so many times in a lifetime. I again, I'm repeating what other people have said. You guys really did kick ass, and you really did step up at a moral juncture. And you steal the Woody, the Yogi Bear line. You came to the fork in the road and you took it, and you took the right one. You paid a high price for it, and the community hasn't really gotten it back. Journalism, we're still alive, which is pretty amazing. When you think about LA, San Francisco don't have weekly papers. The weekly market is disappearing amazingly, but daily journalism is hardly robust. The LA Times just laid off 73 newsroom positions. I read yesterday that National Geographic, which is a pretty staid organization, but great, they just let go the last of their writers. And you want information, you have to pay for it. And somebody said, money makes it happen. You don't have bodies showing up at government meetings. It's not even to expose corruption. Just what the hell happened and why and who said what. It's a scary juncture.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I want to give get well soon to our friend and colleague, Marilyn McMahon, who is recovering from a fall. And also to our friend Lou Cannon, who was a very important figure in all of this, as anyone who sees the film can see. So Starshine Roshell, Nick Welsh, Melinda Burns, and Josh Molina, thank you so much for sharing your memories, your insights, and your struggles. And we will see you next time on Newsmakers. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Starshine and Melinda.
Good to see you.
Yes.